Hello and welcome to another episode of A Junior, a Senior and I. Today's topic is on building a community, and I'm so lucky to have with me today Amanda and Pilou. But before we start with the meat of the subject, let's meet our guests. Pilou, could you introduce yourself in 3 sentences or less, please?
3 sentences. All right. So, hello, I'm Pilou. I'm currently working in the field of data as a data analyst in the ad tech industry. I'm an engineer. I'm also a dad. I'm a lot of things. But today we're going to focus, I guess, on an experience I have with Le Wagon, which is a bootcamp for new developers.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we will talk about that community a bit later. Amanda, could you do the same and introduce yourself in 3 sentences or less, please?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for having me on. My name is Amanda and Pilou. I'm the executive director of the Rails Foundation, which is a foundation set up 2 years ago to support the Rails community. And I am American and based in the Netherlands.
Nice. That's far away. I hope you managed to keep in touch with everyone in America whilst you're here. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to have a little point about both your communities because they are quite different and it will give our listeners some context. So, Amanda, how is your community, which is, I imagine, quite big because it encompasses all Ruby on Rails developers?
Yeah, so the Rails community has been growing organically for 20 years. It's Rails developers who use Rails as a framework around the world, whether that's new developers, whether that's seasoned developers who've been using Rails since the very first version. Yeah, and that's one thing I do want to say. Like, this isn't a community that I built. I want to be very clear about that. I think that's really obvious. It's a community that's built itself for 20 years.
Yes, I see. And I think, Pilou, the community you actually built, you didn't inherit, like Amanda was lucky enough to inherit, is quite different, both in size and scope. Could you tell us a bit about that one?
It's probably a subset of Amanda's community. But basically, I've been a student at Le Wagon Bootcamp at some point. Like, I think it was exactly 5 years ago. And this is a community by itself. Like, there is a private Slack workspace where all alumni, and I think it's like 25,000 alumni here. So quite a lot. And I've remained quite active on the community over the past 5 years, and especially in, I think, like 2020, December 2020, where I discovered the Advent of Code platform and challenge. So I'll talk a bit more about it, but it's an event where there are programming puzzles every day for all the days of December. You can solve using any language. And so I decided to push the challenge to the Le Wagon community. At first in 2020, it was only around Bordeaux, where I did my Le Wagon, my bootcamp. And the year after, in 2021, I decided to open up to the whole Le Wagon community. So I built a platform to have more community-related actions and challenges and leaderboards and whatever around the event dedicated to Le Wagon community. And so now there is a Le Wagon X Advent of Code community, if I can say, which is a Slack channel basically of around 1,000 people.
Cool. I'm guessing the challenges you're faced with those communities are quite different in the sense that Pilou, you could, if I'm not mistaken, build it as you wanted, or you could steer the direction of the community quite freely. Whereas Amanda, I'm guessing that since you inherited a lot of pre-existing people, you needed to adapt your messaging and you needed to keep some traditions that were already there, right? Could you talk a bit more about that, Amanda?
Yeah, certainly. So my first introduction to the community, let's say, and this is where these two worlds merge, was I took a boot camp at Le Wagon 2.5 years ago. And Le Wagon teaches Rails as one of their boot camps. I believe, Pilou, you took a different one, but you would have touched Rails a little bit.
I took the Rails one actually.
Oh, you did? I thought you did data analytics.
No, I was already a data scientist when I took the web bootcamp because I wanted to build the competitor of Airbnb.
Okay, excellent. So that was kind of my first, let's say, onboarding to Rails. And then I got this job. And my first couple of months were really kind of getting to know who's the community, where is the community, what are they struggling with, like all the aspects that make a community, actually, which is an interesting topic on its own, like a combined struggle, a combined sharing something, which is working with Rails. So it took a while. And to be honest, it's really hard already. It's great that you have this Slack channel and you know exactly how many people, Pilou, in your community. it's really difficult to say that for Rails, who's using it and who's still using it, because there's no way to track open source who's using it. If somebody figures that out, that would be amazing. There's a couple of websites around the world that are like, these are companies built on Rails, but as far as users and people who are just like spinning up side projects, it's a hard number to get. I would love to have that number. Like, these are X amount of Rails devs in the world and they're in these locations. But all we know is that North America, Brazil, Japan, and Europe have high concentrations of Rails devs.
Yeah, and I guess it's a fuzzy border anyways, because what's a Rails user, right? Like, if I do C++ on my day job and I have a side project that uses Rails, am I a Rails developer or not? And
yeah, it's really complex to get a hard number. So it's really just all by feel. So in that respect, it's difficult to have KPIs for Foundation. The Foundation is launched to support Rails users around the world and to grow the community. But to grow the community, we have to understand, okay, where did we start and where are we going? And that's a hard number to nail down.
whereas you, Pilou, as Amanda said, you have a quote unquote hard number on, I have X many people on the Slack channel or X many users on the Advent of Code Le Wagon challenge. And also you can shape it more freely than Amanda, right? But what are the main challenges you're facing with that?
So the community per se is very much built onto an event, which is a yearly event, which happens only once a year. It started from zero. It started with Bordeaux, where we were like maybe 40 people participating in this challenge. The platform did not look as beautiful as it looks now, but it was already like a huge achievement that I managed to gather 40 people around that. Even if I was already ambitious to spread out to Le Wagon, I actually started the competition on the 9th of December, which was 8 days after the beginning, because I actually discovered Advent of Code on the 8th, like the day before. And so the year after, I was like more ready also and more prepared to open up to the whole community of Le Wagon. And yeah, I'm free to do whatever I want. Well, I had to negotiate a lot to have a public channel on the Slack workspace of Le Wagon. But otherwise, yeah, the good thing is that now I can capitalize each year on new members coming into this Slack channel and tell them, okay, the event of the year is coming in 3 weeks, for example. But I have to admit, like from the data of this year for 2024, December 2024, at least 75% of participants are new to the event. Like they probably come from recent batches from the year of 2024. They haven't heard of Advent of Code before. So most of them discover Advent of Code through the event I organize. And so the retention rate is super, super low year over year. We have obviously a small subset of very strong and motivated people who know the event who have known the event for some time now. But yeah, my main challenge is to make the number grow. If that's what I want to do, it's not really actually, but to make it grow, I have to do acquisition strategies every year, and every year it's very different. So, and to be clear, in 2024, there were twice as less participants than 2023. And I still cannot clearly explain why, but I'm pretty sure we reached a peak about Advent of Code and challenging codes around COVID time.
Yeah, it makes sense because I've been involved in your community or Pilou, and from what I see, I differentiate that community from the project in the sense that I haven't participated in the project this year because life happens. But I was still going into that Slack channel and seeing people post about it, if not daily, every couple of days. And I do agree with you that maybe less people participated, but I felt like the conversation was also richer than other years where people were still helping each other, etc., etc. Is that a feeling that I, as a member, got, but you didn't see?
I guess it's truly personal because there are some people who just discovered the event and they are so thrilled, they are so passionate about it, and they become very quickly active members of this Slack channel and of the community. And there are some people, like obviously I'm doing mostly acquisitions, so I don't force people to take part in, but I also have a lot of curious people who just don't know about it. They sign in, they check one puzzle, And maybe they think it's too hard, maybe they don't like it, or maybe they just don't have the time. Like doing one programming puzzle every day for 25 consecutive days is obviously super, super demanding. I have done this only once in the past 5 years. So
You've only done it once yourself?
like I've done the 25 puzzles only once in the past 5 years. Yeah. So this year I reached maybe day 12 or something like that. So yeah, there are many reasons for people to churn and good reasons. But otherwise, I would say the spirit remains the same. People who are into the event are very much into it. They help each other. It's just that the roster of people is changing every year.
Yeah, every year I do the same joke, but I basically last until the first weekend and then I become a mascot for whomever I know that's doing the challenge, right?
I see a little bit of similarity there, Pilou. I think with a lot of communities where there's a handful of people, I see it in Rails as well, that are the loudest, the most enthusiastic, the first to show up, the first to, for instance, fill in the CFP to be a speaker at our events. And then there's a huge ocean of more quieter Rails devs that I don't know how to reach out to, and I don't know what they need because they're less involved, let's say. And I think maybe that's an interesting challenge that we both have to like tap into that quiet majority more often.
It brings a question to me in what you're saying. Does that loud minority shape a lot how the community looks like?
I think so, in a way. Yeah. If I think of when I started at the foundation, they were the first to reach out to say, hey, if you need anything, like volunteers for the events, if you need advice, if you need context for the community, they're the ones who have podcasts. So I think in a way they do. They kind of shepherd, or they're at least the mouthpiece for the quiet majority.
I do agree. And especially when you are building a platform and so features for these people, obviously you listen to the community. I have a strong vision. Like I'm a product manager on my own for this. And there are still things that keep getting asked for every year and I don't do for reasons that I think are good. But otherwise, yeah, I tend to listen to people. Like this year, I made a strong statement of removing a lot of leaderboards to avoid cheating or whatever. And then someone told me, yeah, but leaderboards are the reason why I'm doing this. And so 2 hours later, it was back on the platform. So I'm not that strict, but yeah, I would say that if people are loud enough and compelling enough, I'm happy to comply with.
And is there something you both put into motion to try to get that silent majority's voice? Is there something structural that you're doing, or is it more, okay, I'm hearing people, so I'm moving on their feedback, and that's quote unquote enough for me?
Yeah, I have immediately after I started 2 years ago, I added a suggestion form to the foundation page of the Rails website. So you read about the foundation, what we're doing, and at the bottom, if you have any suggestions. And I noticed that a lot of people were doing that by email anyway. So I wanted like an easy way for it to get into our project management software. And people use it, I'd say every week or every 2 weeks. It's a little bit hidden and I don't promote it often, but every 2 weeks, about one or two come through. And it's anything, it's about documentation. It's about where they want the next event to take place. So I think that does work for a lot more people rather than just like the reaching out by DM, which I get a lot as well, emailing the foundation or info@rubyonrails.org, which we also get a lot. So there's a lot of ways to reach us, but the one that I think, because it feels ever so slightly anonymous, is the suggestion box with the occasional complaint as well. And then we also have, of course, issues and PRs on GitHub. Like that hits the foundation a lot because we do the documentation side of things. So like Pilou, we have a lot of people who keep asking for a certain feature. And it's not that we don't want to do it, it's just the bandwidth to do it. And the more people ask, the more it's like, okay, this is actually a good idea. And it's so simple. It's a dark mode, light mode toggle. On the website, we have like both dark mode and light mode, but we don't have a toggle to turn it on. It just goes based on what your system wants. So that's on the to-do list because it's come in through every possible channel, emails, issues on GitHub, and the suggestion form. So we'll probably do that later this year.
So when you say issues on GitHub, is the documentation for the Rails Foundation hosted on the Rails/Rails on GitHub, or is it somewhere else?
Half of it is on Rails repo, and then half is on the Rails/website repo, depending on if it's a guide or the API docs.
Okay, so you look very close actually to what the team does also on the programming level.
Yeah.
Interesting.
then we also have Discord for Rails, but that's specifically for PRs. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to reach out to us.
Yeah, there are so many ways to be reached out. The easy part for me is that since this is a Lovagon specific event, having a Slack channel on the Lovagon workspace Slack workspace where everybody is the go-to fashion to do it. I specifically don't register emails or don't showcase emails or whatever on the platform itself. I just spread out a lot of links to my DMs or to the Slack channel itself on the platform so that if anyone has a question anywhere, they usually converge on the Slack channel, which is super easy for me, even if it's for bugs or whatever. The project is open source on GitHub, and I'm always open to issues and contributions. But statistically speaking, it happened quite little in the past. And when it happened, the guy, so Luis at the point, the guy just joined the team to build the product with me. So he was actually a student at Lovagon. He didn't finish his bootcamp, and he did some puzzles, and he also wanted to contribute and propose new stuff for the platform itself, the platform we built. So there were some PR, some issues involved. And then at some point, I introduced him to the whole platform and to help me on building things. So that kind of thing happened as well. So it's pretty nice.
Just out of pure curiosity, pure morbid curiosity, to be honest, on the height of the event, how many DMs are you getting? I don't know, per week, per day, or whatever?
It used to be more, I think. And also this year, I think, was it this year or last year as well? I channeled everything to the Slack channel. So my personal DM is a bit more hidden. I still get some people, but in the first years, it was a lot, like maybe 3 or 5 a day during the event or before during registration. Hey, I have issues registering. And it's always the same problem. People are just not patient enough to wait for the API to sync with the official Advent of Code platform. Some people do find bugs, so I'm still very open to issues. Like this year, I had this silly bug where GitHub usernames longer than 16 characters could not sign up to the platform, which sounds super silly, but trust me, it made sense at some point. So yeah, people being vocal about this on the Slack channel and people telling, oh, I have the same issue. It's a lot more efficient to me.
I'm guessing, Amanda, since this is your full-time job, if I'm not mistaken, you spend most of your day on building the Ruby on Rails community. For you, Pilou, being a side project, how much time do you spend on it?
Are you going to share the podcast to my employer? Or...
Only if you tell the truth.
In the past, like I usually start during the summer to think about the vision of how the platform I want it to look like for this year, because I heard feedback from the past years. I used to send every year at the end of the event as well a survey to let people say, did you have fun? And what did you like? What features did you like the most, etc. So that helps shaping, but I still think it's still biased by it being the loud minority. Like I have maybe 30 or 40 answers out of 1,000 participants. So that's merely representative. It's also good for the ego because most of the people like the event and they're saying that. I've shared some features based on that. And so usually I have a clear vision. I put on paper a clear vision of what I want to do. And then I just run this project as a project. So having priorities and doing as much things I can do up until the start of the event, which for me is when the registration starts. So roughly a month before December. And this year I was quite happy because we did a lot of new things, but twice as less people. So still a bit disappointed, but again, it's not something I can master much. And also I used in the past years, not this year, but 2 previous years, a lot of my time was focused on actually acquisition. So what should I do? And here I needed the support of Lovagon because they are the ones who can reach the best to the people. And so for the past 2 or 3 years, I've had a global newsletter, which is extremely efficient to get people to know about the event and join the event. And also I added a referral strategy within the platform. The first year, which was not 2024, but 2023, it was efficient. But this year, I think people played the game. And it's always nice because since you have a small reward, if you are the top referrer, it's interesting to see like the 2 or 3 people competing within each other and making sure they can get the most people to the platform, because I make this public in a table on the platform. So that's an alternative leaderboard as well. So all these kind of strategies, I know that 3 years ago, I spent too much time talking to a lot of campus managers, city managers, telling them you should do that for an hour, and then they just do nothing. And for sometimes also good reasons, like they're not incentivized enough to push the event. So now I'm more frugal on this because it's almost a waste of my time. So I prefer to focus on the platform also because I think it's more fun.
Do you have a playbook for them to use? Like 2 months out, post this, 3 weeks out, post this, remind them of the day?
Yeah, I used to do that. I had a presentation like a PowerPoint that gives all the big dates and what you should do exactly.
Yeah.
Also, what messages you should send. Like I wrote the message for them.
Yeah.
But even so, sometimes it's not enough. So my thought was relying on the community would help a bit with the referral system and other things. But yeah, if someone is truly into programming puzzles, it's easy for them to share the knowledge and to share to people around them. But it's pretty niche. So people matching that description are not so many within the event. So people reaching the day 25 because puzzles tend to increase in difficulty over time. People reaching day 25 and being every day doing the puzzles for 25 consecutive days, it's very few people.
It's a lot. I don't even think I've met a traditional advent calendar with chocolates that I remember every single day to do. That's something that challenges me more than chocolate.
Yeah. You brought the discussion to a place I wanted to take it, so thank you, Pilou, because I wanted to ask you both about how you attract new members, right? And part of your answer, Pilou, answered that. Amanda, do you have a strategy to grow the Rails community? And without going to many non-public details, whatever you can share.
Well, so first I'm going to back up to say the foundation was set up for 4 main drivers of community building, and that's events. So we put on an event every year. That's education. So putting out free resources for people to learn Rails, even though there's great boot camps in the community, there's free video tutorials or like paid video tutorials you can follow. We want on our YouTube and our website all the free tutorials you need to learn Rails. It was fixing the documentation because that was it just needed to be fixed up a little bit, the UX and the content. And then probably the most effective or one of the top is marketing. So getting the word out about Rails, whether that's on social media and blogs, creating more videos, just the messaging around Rails in general, because there's a lot of messaging in the community that shouldn't be there. Like Rails doesn't scale or Rails is old and all this stuff. And that's really just not true. So we're countering that by putting out case studies about how Rails scales and videos about how to use Rails and just the stories of how people are using Rails. So I think to grow the community, all of this is needed. Give them a place to meet every year, give them the documentation they need so that if you're learning and the resources. So if you're learning Rails, if you just get curious because you hear about it because of our marketing efforts or somebody else says something, you can go to our website and learn it. That's the idea. We're getting there. And then all the marketing push. So we're just making Rails attractive and talking specifically about the benefits of why you would choose Rails over other frameworks or next to other frameworks, we can say as well. And that's how we're trying to grow it. It's a very unscientific process, and it's really just about having fun and making sure other people can have fun with Rails as well. In short, I think.
Other videos, I think there are recent videos on Rails by some content creator. Yeah, exactly, Typecraft. And this is clearly awesome. Like the energy, the humor, and the quality also of the video and the clarity of how these things are presented. It really brings to another level to me.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. And that came across quite by accident. Like Typecraft, it's a duo actually. There's one behind the camera and then one in front. And they were already making videos, but not about Rails. So they were at Rails World in Toronto, our event, giving a workshop. And I was sat next to Chris, who's the face of Typecraft. And he was like, I'm a Rails developer and I'd love to make content about Rails. And we were looking specifically for somebody like him. We had even put his name forward. Hey, we want videos to the style and tone as Typecraft. So when he said, like, I'm a career Rails developer by day, I was like, oh, this is perfect because you're not making videos about Rails. So we got him on and we're discussing now about making another series with them. So I think the best thing for me, like there's a lot of positive commentary underneath in those videos. I think the most exciting is when somebody says, all right, you've convinced me, I'm going to try Rails now. So it's like, that's one more, like one
Nice.
less we have to worry about, one more in the Rails community. So it's been really successful so far.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, YouTube is probably a very powerful channel, especially over time. Like, you don't care if your video has 2 views in the first day of release, but what matters is that it gets 1,000 over the year, and that's really nice.
There is a question I want to ask around that, because you're saying, Amanda, that when you see that comment of, I want to try Rails, it feels like a huge victory, right? Like, because you're growing that community. How frustrating is it to not have feedback around how it's growing? Because you said before that it's fuzzy, right? You don't know where the limits are, who is actually trying Ruby on Rails, if it's growing or not. And I'm guessing it can feel discouraging of, I'm doing all of this, is it working?
Yeah, that part is a little bit of an unknown. So it has to be kind of quantitative more than qualitative. Did I get that? No, we flip that. Qualitative more than quantitative. But we get enough feedback from current Rails devs about what we're doing to know that we are going in the right direction. So the 4 pillars that I mentioned, the education, events, and whatnot, that's what we set out to do. And then in the suggestion box, what I get often are ideas that we're already working on, which tells me we're definitely working in the right direction. And it's not just me, right? We have the board of the foundation. We're all doing this together. Like all the ideas come from this group of people and the community. So every time we're working on something that we haven't published or announced yet, and somebody makes a suggestion to say, hey, you should make videos about Rails 8, it's like, okay, we're doing the right thing. And I know that we're putting out what the community can benefit from. And it's even those ones that aren't part of the community yet. So I think the feedback from the current community is enough to know that we're doing what we need to do for the future community as well. Those unknowns that we can't measure.
I see what you mean, and that qualitative rather than quantitative is the way to look at it, right? Because, yeah, you cannot know exactly, but you know that you're getting the right feedbacks or the wrong feedbacks and you need to adapt or whatever, but it does allow you to hear some feedback on that.
Yeah. So for instance, right, if we did anything that all of the feedback that we got, or the majority of the feedback we got was, hey, this is wrong, you're doing the wrong thing, this isn't what we want, then it would be like, okay, we need to reassess this because we got it wrong. But so far, it hasn't been that way at all. It's been pretty aligned with what the community seems to want.
And Pilou, I'm guessing you also have a bit of that frustration in the sense that you give yourself a lot on that Advent of Code community. And I guess sometimes it must be discouraging of, okay, I made this leaderboard and now people are abusing it, or people are not giving feedback to this great news that I'm giving, etc. How do you deal with that? Is it a similar thing of, oh, but I'm getting this feedback from these people and it allows me to go forth?
I think I have changed myself a lot over the past years. Like, I think at some point I was very personally affected by what people say, what people think, because it's your baby, like it's the platform I built for them. But actually, I first built it for me. I was like, hey, I have friends I want to compete with. Let's do something a bit more fancy with a scoring system that makes more sense than what's in Advent of Code. But over time, I would say that now I'm very clear about where I want to push the event. And it's a bit the same as the Rails Foundation pillars. Like I do have pillars. My pillar is number 1 is fun. I want people to have fun. Obviously, I cannot control what the puzzles are going to be this year, but I can emphasize on maybe puzzles which are more fun or whatever. For example, this year I introduced a difficulty indicator for each puzzle based on data and machine learning, which was fun to implement. It was another participant who actually built the whole model, and then I just plugged it into the platform. And that's very cool because my main ambition is to make people discover the world of competitive programming puzzles and competitive programming via a nice platform, and do this quite gently. So telling them, okay, this puzzle is too hardcore for you. It's normal if you don't manage to solve it, or if you solve it in 12 hours. That helps a lot. And education is all about the event. And that's why this year I emphasized a lot on the code sharing feature I built within the platform. So people are able to share the code they did for each puzzle. I made it a lot more accessible to people. So anyone can see the other people's puzzle, they can upvote it or whatever, and they can discuss it also on Slack directly, which was super powerful feature. So yeah, all of that is to nurture the discussions, the helping people each other. So obviously there are more senior and more junior people around this community. And so I want it to be as positive as possible. And in the end, if there is some competitiveness with leaderboards, that's fun. But it's hard because a lot of people who have known the event for the past years are very focused towards the competitiveness of the event. Again, it's the loud minority. It's the minority that is in the retention group of people who know about the event, who are probably more senior, especially because they've been programming for a longer time. And so I try to silence them a bit and make sure like new people who are discovering all of this have a clear way for them to discover at their own pace.
We're getting close to the time we have, and I still have a couple of questions, so I'm going to abruptly change the subject because I could stay on this topic for a while. But you both, quote unquote, lead the communities you're in. You're also members of the community, right? Is there a role that members could have in growing a community or in making a community stronger or whatever the goal of that community is?
You mean from the member side of things? Like, what can you do as a member of a community to help?
Yeah, exactly.
That's such a good question. I think, so this is a developer community, right? So being a developer advocate for the community is the best that you can be, which is letting other people know that you're having a great time in the community. Like, I use Rails for this reason. And that's, I think, also important not to bash other frameworks. Like, Rails is good because, and then that's enough of a statement. So just be a good developer advocate for the community. Send your suggestions through, knowing that, at least for our foundation, there's a bandwidth. We can only do so much in a year, but send the ideas through, because that's what a developer advocate does, right? They're talking to the community, but they're also talking to the company, and then they're passing the information back and forth. And I think that's the best thing you can do, at least in the Rails community. Be the individual ambassador or a developer advocate, or whatever you want to say, and portray Rails in a way, or your community in a way that you want to see around you.
I will second that first part of what you said. Well, I will second everything, but I have an anecdote to share about that first part. I've been turned off of some languages or frameworks because their strategy of making me try them was, yeah, but Ruby is so slow, or Rails is crap because, or I specifically remember at some point I was trying to do a small game as a side project. And I was using Pygame, I think, because I wanted to learn Python at the same time. And someone told me, like, yeah, you shouldn't use that. It's crap. Use this other thing. And it's like, yeah, that's definitely not what I'm going to use. Sell it to me. Don't tell me what I'm doing is crap, because then I'm get adversarial and we go nowhere, right?
I was thinking of this just yesterday. Like, if there's one thing I could banish from, I won't say the world, because of course we have greater issues, but if there's one thing I could banish from my work, is constantly seeing other people say, Rails doesn't scale, Rails isn't the best option, blah, blah, blah. These people, and I was thinking of this just yesterday, these people need that to be true. They need their belief to be true, so they keep saying that. But if somebody in the Rails community, in the Ruby community, they're not the ones saying that because they don't believe it, because it's not true. And I also don't see them saying the same thing about other communities, which I think is a testament to this community. It's like, it's just a lot of nice people who want you to be excited about Ruby as well, and Rails. So if I can change anything, it's the people that I have no access to. It's the other communities saying, basically talking shit about Rails and Ruby. Like, that is so frustrating in this role to see that happening all the time. But this community is great because they will say, well, okay, that's not true, because Rails does scale and Rails is great for these reasons. And I use it, or I've moved back to it because of X, Y, and Z. So it is, I would say, one of the frustrating things for sure.
Yeah, and it's characteristic of the internet, right? Like, it allows you to add as much nuance as you can. Discussions on the internet are not nuanced, almost by definition or by happenstance. And context always matters. And Rails is not the perfect solution for all the problems, but it does have its uses in a lot of them. And saying it doesn't scale can be easily disproven because, I don't know, GitHub, for example, or Shopify.
I don't even know if these people are informed. I think they're just repeating what they see. So the more people that see it, they go, oh, but I heard Rails doesn't scale. Not because I used it and tried to scale it to a massive degree, just because I saw somebody else on the internet say it.
Yeah, and again, internet lacks nuance, right? So if you hear someone that you respect saying, I don't know, I'm not gonna use Rails, but C# sucks because it has pointers, you're gonna say, okay, he knows what he's saying, so I'm gonna repeat it, and then internet nuance. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked.
Or TypeScript is no better than plain JavaScript, right?
Yeah, exactly. And again, depending on the context, if I'm just doing a quick script, I probably don't want to be bothered by types. If I'm doing something that requires more things or more collaboration between people, I personally probably would use TypeScript. But things have nuance, and there are always trade-offs. Like, I'm sorry I got sidetracked with a little bit of a rant here, but it's just
The internet.
internet and non-nuance is something that annoys me. I'm gonna ask you one last question, and then I'll have to start winding down the episode, sadly. But what does your day-to-days look like when you're steering a community? What's the typical actions you're taking, the typical tasks you're doing? I see Pilou thinking, so I'm gonna say Amanda first and then Pilou.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a pretty even split. So the average day is I'll have a call with somebody from the community for some reason, whether it's talking about a project, touching base. I talk with agencies a lot. I talk with members a lot, potential members. There is always a check-in. So right now, for instance, we have about 4 projects live that we're trying to move forward. One, of course, is the event in September. So I might be talking to our producers and our vendors to talk about, okay, we need to sign this contract, etc. Another project, for instance, is Typecraft, meeting with them to discuss the next series of videos that we're putting out. It's a lot of project management, basically. Say, like, okay, where are we on this project and moving it forward bit by bit? Because, of course, I'm not the ones creating the videos. I'm not the ones writing the tutorials. I'm not the ones building the stage for Rails World. I would say project management is a good 75% of it, and then talking to community is about 25% of it daily.
And what about you, Pilou, which I know it's not a daily activity, but...
It's a nightly activity. First, I would say that at least 80% of my work is towards the platform because it's what I like to do, improving the platform, adding new features, community-related features. On a day-to-day basis, I take pride in reading every single message in the AOC channel. So I monitor every conversation. To make a bridge with just the previous topic, I think what Amanda said about you want your members to act as the community they want to be in, basically, or it was a lot better phrase than this. I think it's my daily fight. Like when I see newcomers, I want them to feel safe, but I also want them to make other people feel safe. And so every time I see a difficult conversation or people arguing about something within a thread or whatever, now I don't do much, but I was tempted to just calm things down and making sure that no one is frustrated or whatever. It's absolutely not the goal. But most importantly, when I see something very positive, something sharing, or just a newcomer saying, wow, on day 12, they say, oh, I saw the day 1, it was a blast or whatever. Then I put a lot of emphasis on this message and say, congratulations or whatever, because this is what I want to see overall. And I think it's paying forward. Like a lot of members act like that, and it's nourishing itself, basically. It's a positive feedback loop, usually. But yeah, my community time is reading message, answering message, and building the platform. It's very event-based, so it's a bit different, yeah. And activating for acquisition, for getting new members coming, and that's a lot of my time, actually.
I'm gonna ask one last one for the road. What advice would you give to someone that found themselves with a community by a happenstance or because they were hired to steer a community? And they are beginning? Like, what would you say to Amanda 2 or 3 years ago, or to Pilou 3-4 years ago? What advice would you give them?
I would say start with conversations and listening. I don't know about the two of you, but I have strong ideas myself. But if they're pointed in the wrong direction, it's not going to help anybody. So spend the first couple of weeks, couple of months just listening to what people need and making sure you truly understand what the issues are and what the community is facing before just diving into trying to change anything or build things for the community.
I'll second that. The event I'm organizing and also the platform is very close to being a product in itself. If I have to recommend for these product-oriented communities, my main advice is to have only one channel of communication. It can be emails, it can be a Discord server, it could be anything. But if you multiply things, conversations happen at different places and it's less efficient. So at least in the beginning, having only one unique channel of conversation is easier for everybody.
That is so good. Last year, I put down, specifically around our event, Rails World, I wrote down the list of channels that people were reaching out to me specifically. It was madness. It was like 12 different channels long. So the whole time I felt like I was getting in the 2 weeks before the event when people are like, oh, I need to be at Rails World in a couple of weeks. I have information I need. It was Slacks, it was Campfire, it was Discord, it was DMs on every single social media platform, it was email. I was going insane. So I think that's a really good tip.
With this really good tip, I think we can call the end of the episode. It was a true pleasure to having both of you sharing your experiences. Thank you so much for having been a guest here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pablo. Thanks for inviting me for my first ever podcast.
Good chat.
Yeah, good chat.